The sun had barely cleared the jagged peaks of the Rockies when the cadets assembled on the tarmac. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of jet fuel and morning frost. It was the first day of advanced flight training, and the sound of T-6 Texan II engines warming up rolled across the field like distant thunder. The cadets stood in loose formation, flight suits crisp, helmets tucked under their arms, a mix of confidence and restless energy humming in their stance. Tyler Brooks stood at the front of his group, chin tilted slightly upward, eyes scanning the hangar doors. He had heard rumors about a new instructor taking over their section. Some said it was a hotshot pilot from Nellis. Others guessed a test pilot from Edwards. None expected who actually stepped into view. She walked across the flight line with even steps, boots tapping against concrete. A plain gray flight suit marking her from a distance. No medals, no name patch, just quiet composure. Major Emily Carter. She carried no helmet, no visible rank, until she was close enough for them to see the subdued insignia on her shoulder. She didn't look like the kind of officer who had logged 1,000 flight hours in combat zones. She looked, as Tyler muttered to the cadet beside him, more like someone who taught yoga on weekends. A few muffled laughs rippled through the group, quickly swallowed by the wind. Emily stopped in front of them, expression unreadable, eyes scanning faces without judgment or hesitation. The silence stretched. Her voice broke it. Calm, but firm. Morning. Gentlemen. The simple words carried across the tarmac. Low and clear. The kind of tone that didn't need to shout to be heard. She handed her clipboard to the assistant instructor beside her and looked back at the cadets. I'm Major Carter. I'll be taking your flight training block for the next 6 weeks. Her eyes settled briefly on Tyler, who tried not to shift under her gaze. We'll start simple, she continued, glancing at the row of aircraft lined up behind her. Emergency descent drills. The words hung in the cold air. Unexpected. Tyler frowned, whispering something about warm-up exercises being for beginners. Emily didn't react. She just turned toward the planes, her voice steady as ever. We start with emergency descent drills, she said again, letting the pause sink in. Let's see who remembers how to breathe under pressure. The laughter faded completely. Engines roared to life behind them. And for the first time that morning, no one dared speak. The air shimmered slightly over the runway as the morning sun rose above the Rockies. The T-6 Texan II trainers sat in perfect alignment, their propellers glinting in the light. Inside the control tower, Major Emily Carter adjusted her headset, the microphone resting just below her chin. Her eyes moved between the radar screen, the instructor's clipboard, and the aircraft outside. It was the first official day of flight drills, and tension hung thick in the air. Through the radio, she could hear the cadets running through pre-flight checks, their voices tight with excitement. Every sound carried weight, the click of a switch, the hum of the engine spooling up, the call-outs echoing across the channel. Tyler Brooks's voice came through first. Cadet 403, ready for takeoff. Runway 27. His tone carried that familiar edge of overconfidence, the kind she'd heard from dozens of young pilots before. She keyed her mic, her voice calm. Cleared for takeoff. Brooks, maintain climb to 5,000 feet. Then report level. The T-6 surged forward, tires squealing slightly before lifting off. Nose rising into a clean arc against the blue. One by one, the other aircraft followed, forming a loose pattern over the foothills. Emily watched the formation spread out on her display, her fingers tracing their movement. For the next 30 minutes, she listened as they ran through drills, her voice occasionally breaking the silence to correct a heading or altitude. When it was time for emergency maneuvers, she leaned closer to the mic. All right, we'll run the roll recovery sequence. Maintain control through 360 degrees. Keep the wings level on exit. Tyler was first. Roger that, he said, voice clipped. The maneuver began clean, but halfway through the roll, his timing faltered. The nose dropped too far. The bank angle steepened, and the altimeter began to tumble. Emily's eyes narrowed. Through the radio came his strained breathing. Then his voice. Sharp and defensive. "I've got it under control." She pressed her mic. "Brooks, you're approaching stall. Reduce angle of attack. Ease throttle. Stabilize pitch." His reply came quick. Almost panicked. "I said I have control." The next second, the stall warning blared through the headset. Emily's tone didn't change. Simulated ejection. Now, her command cut through everything. A pause. Then a sharp click. The simulation ended. The aircraft reset to level flight, but the silence afterward was heavier than before. When they landed, the cadets climbed out, faces pale beneath their helmets. Tyler stormed toward her, his jaw tight. He muttered that she'd embarrassed him in front of everyone. Emily didn't raise her voice. "Arrogance kills faster than gravity," she said simply, then turned back toward the tower. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to pity Tyler or admire her composure. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the wind moving over the wings and the distant echo of her voice still in their heads, calm, steady, and impossible to ignore. The simulator bay was cold and humming, with low mechanical sound, the kind that never stopped. Even between sessions, rows of T6 Texan II simulators lined the dark room, each one glowing faintly with cockpit lights. It was after 1900 hours, and the cadets looked more tired than confident. Fluorescent bulbs flickered above them, reflecting off helmets and the pale shine of oxygen masks hanging from hooks. Major Emily Carter stood in front of the group, clipboard in hand, her posture as steady as the hum around them. Tonight's simulation, she explained, would test their composure. Night flight. Engine failure after takeoff. Minimal instruments. Poor visibility. Her tone was calm, almost casual, but every cadet knew it meant trouble. She told them that the goal wasn't perfection, it was control. The first rule, she said, is always the same. You fly the aircraft first. Then you think. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes move across the faces lined up before her. From the back, Tyler Brooks muttered under his breath, just loud enough for a few to hear. Wonder if she's ever done that for real. A quiet chuckle spread around him. Emily didn't flinch. She looked at him, eyes unreadable. Neither was Iraq in 2008. She said. The words were simple, almost quiet. But they landed hard. The room went still. No one spoke again. She turned back to the simulator screens, voice steady. Cadet Brooks. You're first. Tyler strapped into the seat. The curved canopy of the simulator reflecting his own face in the dim light. The interior buzzed softly as systems powered up. On the overhead screen, the runway glowed faintly in the darkness. Emily's voice came through his headset, crisp and clear. Maintain centerline. Rotada at 85 knots. Climb out at 120. The simulated propeller spun, and the aircraft began to roll forward. Takeoff was smooth. For a few seconds, it felt perfect. Then the engine warning light flashed red, and the sound dropped to a dull sputter. Tyler's breath hitched. His hand moved too fast. Throttle full. Flaps down. Mixture full rich. He skipped the fuel boost pump. The airspeed dropped below 100 knots. The stall horn blared. The screen went black. System crash. Emily's voice came through again. Calm. Almost surgical. Reset. Let's try that again. She guided him through it step by step. Reduce angle of attack. Nose down 2 degrees. Check fuel flow. Turn boost pump on. Establish glide speed. Tyler gritted his teeth, his hands trembling on the controls. The second attempt ended in another simulated stall. He exhaled sharply, muttered something under his breath, and slammed his gloves down on the console. The sound echoed through the bay. Emily walked forward, slow and deliberate. She stopped beside him, her reflection faint in the canopy glass. Her tone didn't rise. "The plane is a mirror," she said quietly. "If you lose calm, it loses lift." No one moved. The hum of the machines filled the silence again, heavy and constant. Tyler stared at the dark screen, the reflection of his own frustration, staring back. Emily didn't say anything more. She just placed her hand on the edge of the simulator, gave a single nod, and walked back to her desk. The cadets exchanged glances, realizing for the first time that what she was teaching wasn't just flying. It was survival. The office was small, tucked into the corner of the operations building. At 21:30, the rest of the base had gone quiet. Only the faint hum of the ventilation system and the distant growl of a jet engine somewhere down the runway broke the stillness. The light on Major Emily Carter's desk was low, casting soft shadows over stacks of reports and an old metal box. On top of it sat a worn patch from the 74th Fighter Squadron and a faded photograph of 6 pilots standing shoulder to shoulder at Bagram Air Base. Their smiles were wide, their flight suits covered in dust. One of them, a tall man with sunburned cheeks and a grin that could cut through exhaustion, had his arm around Emily's shoulders. Her younger self was there too, eyes sharp and full of purpose. She picked up the photo, thumb tracing the edges. For a moment, she was back there. The sound of paper gave way to the heavy vibration of the A-10C Thunderbolt II. Her aircraft call sign Hog 21. The cockpit was hot and loud, the kind of noise that became part of her heartbeat. The radio crackled with overlapping voices. Ground unit reporting contact. Pinned down by enemy fire. They needed close air support fast. Emily's voice had been steady as she acknowledged. Confirming coordinates, she rolled the aircraft left, eyes fixed on the valley below. The terrain burning orange in the heat haze. The GAU 8 divided by A Avenger cannon came alive beneath her, its deep rumble shaking the cockpit. The first burst tore through the ridgeline, dust and smoke lifting in violent curls. The smell of gunpowder filled the air system, thick and metallic. Her wingman's voice broke through the static. Hog 22 taking hits. She looked right, saw his aircraft trailing black smoke. Her pulse didn't spike. She had trained too long for that. She keyed her mic, her tone level. "Keep it steady. I've got your 6. The control tower was telling her to disengage, but she ignored it. She dove again, banking hard, firing short controlled bursts. Each second felt stretched thin, every movement deliberate. The world shrank to instruments, targets, and the trembling vibration in her hands. When she finally pulled up, her right wing was shredded, hydraulics screaming. But her wingman was climbing again. She brought her A-10 back over the mountains, nose low, airframe rattling like bones. When the wheels touched the runway, the aircraft leaned heavy to one side, dragging sparks down the strip. She had made it home? Barely. Back in her office, the photo trembled slightly in her hand before she set it down beside the patch. The room was silent again. The only sound, the faint echo of jet engines rolling through the night. Her eyes lingered on the man in the picture. She whispered softly, almost to herself, still keeping that promise. Then she turned off the light and sat for a while, in the quiet, the memory settling back into place, the calm discipline returning. It was the same stillness she carried into every classroom and every cockpit, forged from fire and loss. And it was why she demanded the same from everyone who learned under her. By 1600 hours, the air over the Colorado mountains had shifted from calm to restless. Heavy clouds rolled in from the west, dark and uneven, swallowing the late afternoon sun. The wind picked up, low and steady at first, then gusting strong enough to rattle the hangar doors. On the flight line, 4 T-6 Texan II aircraft sat in formation, engines idling, their props cutting through the thickening air. Major Emily Carter stood in the ground control tower, headset on, eyes locked on the runway through a sheet of gray haze. The cadets' voices came through the comms, clipped and tense. Formation flight drill. 1 hour route over the foothills. Maintaining 200 knots at 5,000 feet. The weather briefing had warned of turbulence, but not this. Lightning flickered far to the west, a faint flash that seemed to breathe life into the clouds. Tyler Brooks sat in the lead trainer, hands gripping the yoke tighter than usual. The smell of oil and rubber mixing with the metallic taste of adrenaline, he told himself it was just another flight, just another chance to prove control. At 16:20, Emily's voice came through the radio. Maintain heading 280. Keep spacing at 100 yards. Her tone was calm, each word deliberate, carrying the weight of someone who had said the same thing under far worse skies. Tyler's wingman called out a light crosswind. "Copy that," Emily replied, eyes flicking across the instruments on her screen. She could see the data feed showing wind shear creeping in from the north. The storm was closing faster than expected. Minutes later, the first pocket of turbulence hit. The aircraft jolted, hard enough to make every pilot's stomach drop. Tyler overcorrected, pulling back too sharply. The nose pitched up, airspeed bleeding off. His breathing grew shallow. He fought the yoke, his voice tight over the radio. Losing altitude, trying to stabilize, Emily's response cut through the static. Calm, controlled, surgical, trim right, nose down 2 degrees. Hold throttle at 70%. Don't fight the wind. Work with it. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Rain streaked across his canopy, and thunder rolled through the mountains like a slow drumbeat. The aircraft shuddered again, wings buffeted by crosswind. Emily repeated herself. Unshaken. Nose down. Eyes forward. Trust your instruments. Tyler followed. His movements smaller now, more measured. The altimeter steadied, the vibration eased. One by one, the other cadets fell back into formation. For the next several minutes, no one spoke. The only sounds were the engines, the hiss of rain, and Emily's quiet breathing over the open mic. When they landed at 17:15, the tarmac was slick, the sky nearly black. The cadets climbed out of their aircraft, soaked, shaking from the adrenaline more than the cold. Tyler stood still for a long moment, helmet in hand, his heart still racing. Emily walked toward them, rain dripping from the bill of her cap. Her voice carried softly through the wind. What you felt up there is the line between fear and control. You cross it too far in either direction, and the sky stops forgiving you. No one answered. They didn't need to. Tyler met her eyes briefly, and in that quiet exchange, the mockery was gone. What replaced it was something new. Respect. Unspoken but absolute. Behind them, thunder cracked once more over the mountains, then faded into silence. The next morning, the air inside the Academy's main briefing room felt unusually heavy. The cadets filed in quietly, their boots echoing against the polished floor. No one knew why they had been called in at 0700 hours. The rows of seats filled quickly, and the murmur of low conversation faded as Colonel Davis stepped to the front of the room. He stood beside Major Emily Carter, who was dressed in a spotless flight suit, her rank insignia sharp against the fabric. Her posture was straight, her expression calm, her hands resting behind her back. Behind them, the projector displayed the emblem of the United States Air Force. Davis spoke first, his voice even, but carrying an edge of authority. He began by reminding the cadets of what the Air Force stood for: precision, integrity, and service before self. Then his tone shifted slightly. Some of you have been wondering about Major Carter's background, he said, eyes sweeping across the room. I think it's time you understood who's been training you. He picked up the remote and clicked. The emblem faded, replaced by a photograph, an A-10C Thunderbolt II, call sign Hog-21, streaking low over desert terrain, smoke curling from the ground below. Another click revealed a service record. The words crisp and formal. Major Emily Carter, A-10C pilot, 74 Fighter Squadron, recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross for Valor, awarded during Operation Iron Shield. A ripple went through the room, quiet but visible. Tyler Brooks, sitting near the back, felt his stomach twist. His gaze moved from the glowing screen to the woman standing motionless at the front. The colonel continued, describing the mission. In 2008, under heavy enemy fire, Carter remained on station after her wingman was shot down. She held her position for 12 minutes, providing cover fire while coordinating the rescue team. Her aircraft returned with hydraulic failure, one engine destroyed, and over 40 bullet holes through the fuselage. The words hung in the air like static. No one moved. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady. She didn't correct or expand on what the colonel had said. Instead, she looked at the cadets one by one, her expression soft but firm. What you think strength looks like, she said, isn't always what it is. Respect and discipline aren't loud. They're quiet. They're what keep you alive when everything else is falling apart. She paused for a moment, letting the silence deepen. What you mock is what you hope to become. Her words landed gently but carried weight far beyond their sound. Around the room, cadets lowered their eyes, some shifting uncomfortably, others simply staring ahead. Tudas at Riegel, his throat dry, his mind replaying every moment he doubted her. The projector light flickered across her uniform, casting a faint shadow behind her. No one applauded. No one dared to speak. When the briefing ended, the cadets filed out in silence. Emily remained where she stood, watching them go, her face unreadable. The respect in the room was unspoken but absolute, born not from fear, but from understanding, and for the first time, Tyler realized that the calm voice in his headset had once faced real storms and never once wavered. The morning air was sharp and dry, the kind of air that carried sound clean and far. It was 0800 hours at the Colorado Air Force Academy, and the sky stretched cloudless above the Front Range. The wind, though, came fast and cold off the peaks. It was a perfect day for a test that would decide everything. 4 T-6 Texan II aircraft sat ready on the line, propellers spinning slow at idle. The rhythmic chop, rising and falling like the pulse of the airfield. Major Emily Carter stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, her hair pulled tight beneath her cap. She watched the cadets move through their pre-flight routines with crisp precision. No one joked or whispered this time. There was purpose in every movement. Tyler Brooks led the team. His shoulders were squared, his voice steady as he called out the checks. Months ago, his tone had carried arrogance. Now it carried something better: composure. The assignment was a cross-country navigation flight in formation, 150 miles out, maintaining spacing and radio discipline while adjusting to unpredictable turbulence. Emily's voice came through their headsets as they taxied to position. Maintain formation integrity. Communication is your lifeline. Then she fell silent. Her job now to observe. At 0830, the first aircraft lifted off, followed by the others. Climbing through thin air that shimmered with heat waves, they formed up cleanly, sunlight flashing off their wings. The first half of the route went smoothly. The cadence of radio chatter was tight, professional, each voice clipped and confident. Then, 40 minutes in, one cadet's transmission cut out. Static hissed over the comms. Tyler checked his instruments. confirmed visual contact, and realized they had lost communication with their number 4 aircraft. The easy choice was to continue the route and complete the mission solo. The right choice was harder. He hesitated for 2 heartbeats, then spoke clearly into the radio. Formation will hold, visual contact maintained, we support and return together. His tone carried none of the old pride, only control. From ground control, Emily listened. Her pen paused above the page. She didn't speak, but a small nod marked her approval. The flight home was rough. Crosswinds buffeted the aircraft as they descended through the valley. The sharp gusts, forcing constant corrections, Tyler held formation tight, adjusting speed and altitude until they crossed the final checkpoint and aligned for approach. When they touched down at 10:20, the aircraft rolled to a stop in perfect sequence. Engines wound down. Silence settled over the field. On the tarmac, the cadets stood in a loose semicircle. Flight suits streaked with sweat and dust. Tyler stepped forward, helmet under his arm. His voice was quiet as he admitted to Emily that he had been wrong about her. Wrong about what strength really looked like. She met his eyes, her expression unreadable but warm. "Don't apologize," she said. "Learn. Strength isn't about being right. It's about being steady." He nodded once, and that was enough. The other cadets watched, understanding without words that they had crossed a line together from students to airmen, from pride to purpose. The wind moved softly across the runway now, and for the first time, Emily allowed herself a small smile. Discipline, she knew, wasn't perfection. It was persistence. And watching them, she saw that lesson finally take flight. The first light of morning touched the edge of the Rockies, painting the airfield in shades of gold and soft gray. The sky was clear, the kind of calm that comes after weeks of wind and rain. Rows of T-6 Texan II aircraft stood silent on the tarmac, their wings catching the glow of the rising sun. The smell of jet fuel lingered faintly in the cool air, mixed with the clean scent of Mountain Dew. A few hundred yards away, the cadets gathered in formation, their boots aligned, faces steady, movements quiet and disciplined. They were not the same group that had once laughed and doubted. They stood together now, a team rebuilt by grit and humility. Major Emily Carter walked along the edge of the runway, her steps unhurried. The gravel crunched softly under her boots. She wore her usual flight uniform, plain and practical, a faint trace of dust at the knees from the previous day's drills. The wind caught the corner of her sleeve, revealing the faint outline pressed into her wrist beneath the leather band, the old patch of the 74th Fighter Squadron. Long faded but never forgotten, Colonel Davis approached from the side, his posture relaxed, his expression thoughtful. He stopped beside her, hands clasped behind his back. "You rebuilt them," he said. His tone carried keen admiration. Emily watched the cadets at attention for a long moment before answering. "They rebuilt themselves." Her voice was soft but firm, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to carry truth. Davis gave a small nod, understanding. Across the field, Tyler Brooks stepped forward from the formation. The others followed his movement with their eyes but stayed silent. He walked up to Emily, his chin lifted, his shoulders squared. When he stopped, he brought his hand up in a crisp salute. It wasn't for rank or requirement. It was for respect. Emily returned it, precise and calm. No words were needed. Later that morning, she sat in her office, sunlight stretching across the desk. The same small metal box rested in front of her. Its surface was scratched, corners worn smooth from years of travel. She opened it carefully. Inside lay the faded photograph of her old A-10 crew, their faces grinning under a harsh Afghan sun, and the worn patch from her squadron. She reached into her flight bag and pulled out a new photograph, her cadets standing on the training field, uniforms smeared with mud. Exhaustion turned into pride. She placed it beside the old one. The past and present side by side, two generations bound by the same unspoken code. Her hand rested gently on both. The words left her lips barely above a whisper. Promise kept. Outside, the airfield came alive again. Engines turned over, their low rumble rolling across the plains. The new class of cadets began their drills. Voices sharp, movements crisp against the morning light. Emily stood at her window, watching for a long moment before turning away. The sound of flight training filled the distance, a steady rhythm that seemed to belong to her heartbeat. Leadership, she thought, wasn't about medals or recognition. It was about leaving strength behind. As she stepped out into the sunlight, the sky opened wide above her, endless and clean. The horizon stretched forward like a promise, and for the first time in a long while, Emily Carter felt peace, not from what she had done, but from who she had helped them become.